Imagine a realm where nothing broke all at once. The Calteris Expanse ended without fire or thunder. It ended in a tightening grip that never learned when to let go. And standing at its edge is Wryke, a keeper of doors about to discover that survival is not always a reward.
My name is Wryke, and I document here the events that led to the collapse of my realm and my home, the Calteris Expanse. I am its only survivor. It did not end with a single bright calamity one could call a disaster. It ended the way an overworked hand ends, by tightening until even rest becomes another kind of strain on it. I felt it first in places nobody watched, because they were designed to be reliable. A corridor that should have yielded on approach held its rigidity for too long and then opened with a reluctant flex. A membrane gate that once responded to touch with a smooth parting began to opt for hesitation. The expanse continued to breathe, share load and correct itself, but the corrections began to ramp up. I pressed my palm against an interface wall and listened through it, the same way I had since my earliest assignments. In Calteris, the structures were alive, just as the systems were. They were interlinked, responsive, and shaped to distribute stress before it turned destructive. That was the old principle, the one that made Calteris more than architecture. Hold required give, and give prevented tearing. The Expanse had been built on that truth, so fundamentally it was meant to be instinctive. They called it the held state. Now that instinct had begun to waver. My instruments were simple but precise. I carried resin-scribed plates and tension strips that translated invisible strain into patterns my body could read. They just did not lie. I watched lines creep into angles, heat gather where it should have bled downward, and pressure pooling behind sealed seams that had once been used as relief. I reported it the proper way. I never brought alarm to any inspector's station. Calteris distrusted alarm. Alarm implied panic, and panic implied loss of hold. No, I arrived calm, set the plates down, and waited until I had his attention. The inspector's eyes moved across the resin markings. "The Expanse holds," he said. "It holds too tightly," I replied, wondering if the inspector comprehended what I had shown him. "That is a contradiction," came the response. "It is a condition," I said, but my words sounded like a challenge. "Corrections are overreaching. Gates are sealing under ordinary approach. Relief seams are refusing to vent." The inspector tapped one plate with his finger. "Your tools are old." "They are properly calibrated, Inspector." "The Expanse calibrates itself," he said. "It has held longer than you have existed, Wryke. You have worked on thresholds for too long. You see strain everywhere because you are trained to see it." "Strain is everywhere," I said. "That is why thresholds matter. If give is removed, strain becomes fatigue, and then failure." The inspector became tense. "The held state is not yours to judge, Wryke." "I am not judging. I am recording and analyzing." "Then do that," the inspector replied. "Do not interfere. Unauthorized adjustment introduces volatility, and that is how worlds break." I left with the plates returned to my belt, and the words of that last sentence ringing in my ears. Worlds break. As though breakage was always sudden, dramatic, and always caused by external forces. Never internal decisions to hold beyond tolerance. Oh no, people have such short memories. The Feltasha incident was in living memory. Had the downbleeds not been detected, it would have been more than 500 deaths. Much more. I continued my work, moving from one interface chamber to another. I made the small adjustments I was permitted to make within the sanctioned tolerances. Every correction was swallowed elsewhere. A seam loosened where I asked it to loosen, only to be clamped harder in the next stratum. It felt like the expanse itself was correcting against me. Later, I found myself in a relief chamber designed to bleed excess heat downward, Feltasha back in my thoughts. There, I did what I had been warned not to do and opened the venting membrane. I held it there with my own weight. I did not tear it or force it wide. I just kept it from sealing while pressure flowed through the intended path. The relief was immediate, of course. I knew it would be. The resin plates cooled, and the vibration in the floor eased into a steadier rhythm. For a short time, the expanse felt like itself again, and I allowed myself to feel a small triumph. On the fourth cycle after it, the inspector returned with 2 attendants whose function was enforcement. They did not seize me. They guided me with a little light pressure toward the chamber's exit, making the decision feel inevitable. "You will be reassigned, Wryke," the inspector said. "I prevented fatigue," I said, more bluntly than was usual for me. "You introduced an unsanctioned variable. The expanse does not maintain stability through improvisation. It does so through our obedience." "Obedience is not a principle," I said, before I could stop myself. Calterians never display shock, but the inspector's face exhibited the nearest thing to it that was possible for him. "Comfort is how the held state remains so." I felt the pulse in the floor under my feet. "And if it's held too tightly?" The inspector did not answer the question. In Calteris, unanswered questions were treated as solved. They walked me down into the understrata, where the structures were thicker and older, and meant to absorb failures that could not be prevented above. I was set at an under-threshold, a membrane boundary that quivered in a very worrying manner. "You will watch for intrusions," the inspector said. "You will record. You will report. You will not adjust." I placed my palm on the under-threshold and felt it vibrating with pressure patterns that did not belong to it. "This is a fault line," I said. "It is a buffer," the inspector replied. "A buffer becomes a tear if it cannot yield." The inspector's patience, if he had any, was at its limit. "Wryke, you have begun to imagine necessity where there is only your urge to act. Watch. Do not act." Then they left me, and I watched. Small intrusions came to begin with, a wave of cold that did not match any internal flow, a tremor in the membrane suggesting pressure from a place that should not press. I recorded them. I reported them. Each report seemed to convince them further that hold was the solution and that sealing was safety. The under-threshold swelled. Corridors near it grew stubborn. A gate that once permitted passage with a steady touch began to resist, then yield violently. And then distance began to unravel. A corridor returned me to the same junction, no matter what path I took. I marked the wall with a resin scratch, and returned to find the scratch smeared sideways because the wall itself had distorted under its own skin. The expanse faltered, not stopping, just weakening to breaking point. I pressed my palm to the main under-threshold and felt something press back. So I waited until the membrane drew inward and, for a moment, became translucent. A sequence of pulses traveled through the membrane into my hand, trying to correct because there were no stable coordinates left inside. I understood enough to recognize the pattern of a system attempting to self-seal, while simultaneously losing the ability to seal anything at all. The Calteris Expanse did not scream. It just began to fail everywhere at the same time. Strata overlapped. A chamber above pressed against a corridor below, folding itself into it. Warmth pooled where it should have bled, and cold gathered in icy patches. Interfaces clamped, loosened, and clamped again. It was completely chaotic. I did the only thing I had ever done when systems reached the brink. I became the buffer. I stood my body against the underthreshold and braced myself. The pressure surged, then pulled. The expanse was drawing inward. My joints ached with a strain that was pulling my body out of alignment. "Release," I said. I was talking to the expanse itself. "Permit, give. Do not hold until you tear." The membrane pulsed back and seemed about to give, when it suddenly surged and split. I felt the breach open under my hands, a yielding that was not controlled. The space beyond yawned in front of me, and with it came a sensation of falling. I was being drawn through a seam that was not meant to be traversed. My feet left the floor as I was hurled forward. The underthreshold became a corridor of compression. Layers slid across layers. Membranes turned into currents. My instruments cracked and crumbled as the resin plates dissolved. Their calibrations had become meaningless. I did not try to save them. Better to save my function. I reached outward, searching for any point where hold could become yield, or where strain could be spread and not concentrated. The fold tightened around me, and I felt my limbs being elongated under the pressure. I was changing. Later, I discovered my skin had grayed and become rougher. My hair had been stretched into brittle strands, trailing behind me. There were other presences also. Fleeting, unmoored functions dissolving as the expanse lost coherence. I persisted because my role was simple: to bear intrusion, keep thresholds and hold without crushing. But it was too late. Calteris's pulse diminished to nothing, but another then appeared. Not a system gasping to maintain itself, a presence testing what had entered its reach. It touched me like a probe, and I felt stinging along my chest. I sensed it wanted to know whether I was a parasite or a reinforcement. I tried to speak. The first sound that left me was a dry rasp. I forced my throat to utter something meaningful. "Function," I said. "Buffer. I do not consume." I let my body relax and present no resistance. Next, I struck a hard surface and lost consciousness. When I came round, I pushed myself upright. The chamber I was in was root-grown and was like nothing I had ever seen before. Openings in the walls resembled mouths, like dark slits that promised corridors and rooms. I stood up carefully and realized my limbs felt too long and my joints were creaking. I lifted my hands and spoke. "I am Wryke. I bear intrusion. I seek bound duty." Resin oozed from a seam and slid toward me. I touched it with my fingertips, and it burned a little. Visions entered my mind of axes, swords, old blood, the ghost of fire licking wood, and the stubborn endurance of roots that had withdrawn beyond reach. The place did not just tell me a story, it pressed its history into me. I held still, and then came footsteps. A figure emerged from one of the dark slits, tall and upright. Her skin held an amber glow with a smooth texture. Golden locks draped from her head, and her eyes were bright with stored light. She stopped a few paces away and spoke. "You carry fracture." My realm collapsed. The Calteris Expanse. It unheld. And it pushed you here to me, through my gate. Well, almost. "That is no minor event," she said. "It took me. I held a threshold. The threshold broke. I was carried." Her eyes moved over me. She was reading more than my words. "I know the Expanse. Collapsed. That is disappointing." She began to use her language in a way I could better understand back then. "You are intrusion. I am also buffer. Give me constraint. Give me duty. Seal me if I tear. Purpose is a hunger. It feeds on what it can. Then bind my purpose. Do not let it roam." I felt the place poised, ready to clamp if I moved wrongly. Then she told me where I was. You stand in the U-deep. Deep. That word meant something to me. This place was not breadth held by systems, it was depth held by intention. The U-deep is not refuge. It is not replacement. I did not seek replacement. I sought continuance of function. You were shaped by hold. Yes. And you believe hold saves? It prevents tearing, I said. Hold can be the tear. This place remembers fire. It remembers axes. It remembers a protector unreturned, and all that fear makes mortals do. Then it is scarred. She corrected me. It prevails, and it wakes. She moved closer. I am the hollow matron, fifth of the U-bound hosts. I didn't know how to react, so I bowed awkwardly. My altered joints made it painful. Then you can assign me. I was careful not to name her as a mere function again. I will not touch what is not mine. I will not place my hands on your heart. Give me an edge that needs watching. The hollow matron stared at me. The U has already tested you. It read you. It tasted Calteris in you. It did not like what it found. I was a little irritated by the delay. Then why am I not sealed? Because waking brings weakness. Weakness invites intrusion. Intrusion must be born. The U is old enough to know that refusing everything foreign is another kind of death. I felt alignment settle into me. I was again a piece fitting where I could be used. Then let me bear, I said. You will not bear at the center. You will not become a second host. You will not turn this place into another expanse. I knew it already. I will accept all constraint. You will serve in the sallow paths, she said, and as she spoke, there was a flexing as corridors elsewhere adjusted to the decision. Where boundaries loosen, where cold and rot attempt entry, where small failures gather before they become great, you will bear. You will report only to me. You will speak when speaking prevents harm. You will remain silent when speech would feed fear. The loss of my home began to hit me. In Calteris, they listened only to what claimed center. They overlooked thresholds. And here? Here the center listens to the edge, I said, then checked myself and added, if it is wise. The hollow matron's eyes warmed, and she smiled. Do not flatter, Wryke. I do not know how. I know only how to tend systems. Stewardship is not only mechanism, it is also restraint, and sometimes mercy. I suddenly felt grief that had not fully surfaced during the fold because survival had demanded my focus. I tended Calteris. It still died. It died, and you did not. That is important, Wryke. You will start again here and learn much. Language, systems, protection. The hollow matron turned, and the chamber yielded to her as she moved toward a corridor. Come with me. We walked through passages grown from roots and held open by thick spans, stripped of ornament. The floor was springing fiber underfoot, and my senses naturally reached outward, reading the pressure and resistance. I quickly found that this place spoke in intention and not correction. It did not calibrate itself in the Calteris way. At a junction where 3 passages met, the hollow matron stopped and placed her palm against the wall. Amber pockets brightened, then dimmed. This is a sallow path. It runs near what is above and what is beyond. It is where intrusion comes first. I looked down the corridor and felt a chill that did not match the U-Deep's warmth. The passage resisted slightly, asking whether entry should be allowed. You will not force it. You will not clamp it because you fear drift. You will listen until you know whether to permit, resist, or redirect. I understood. In Calteris, we would have called that calibration, I said. And here, it is care and protection. I swallowed the correction. Then teach me care and protection that does not become grip. The hollow matron paused, thinking. You came from a realm that collapsed because it held too tightly. Do not bring that flaw here. I felt the truth of it. I had already been reaching to map, understand, and stabilize. It was what I knew. I will learn, give, I said. The hollow matron's palm moved from the wall to my chest, which to me was calibration. Warmth spread through my now rough grey skin, and for a moment I felt the U-Deep's attention within me. You will be watched by the U, by those bound to the U-Deep. You will be tested again. I expect it, I replied. Remember Wryke. Expectation prevents surprise. Surprise breeds fear. Fear breeds fire. The hollow matron removed her hand and stepped away. Begin, Wryke. This is home now. She turned into the corridor we had arrived through and left. I was left at the junction, standing alone, and for the first time since the Calteris Expanse began to fail, I did not feel as though I was working against a system that refused to be helped. The U-Deep did not welcome me with softness, but it acknowledged my place. It gave me constraint. It gave me an edge. I placed my palm against the wall again, feeling the root spans and the stored light, reading the subtle strains the way I had always read strain, but now with a new caution. Not every strain was an error. Some strain was the price of living. The path ahead resisted slightly, and in that resistance, I heard the U-Deep asking the questions it would ask me over and over in the years to come. Permit? Resist? Redirect? I let my breathing settle. I let the U-Deep's pulse into me. And then I stood taller. I was not the savior of a fallen realm or the master of a new one. I was what I had always been at my best. A function that chose give before tearing came.
Anything or anyone who refuses to bend will eventually mistake their own rigidity for strength. And when the strain becomes too great, they will not fail loudly or nobly, but catastrophically, collapsing under the very tension they believed would save them.